Good afternoon, Mitakuyepi. My relatives, I'm so happy and honored to welcome you to the Cultural Alternatives to Detention for our young relatives, our hope and our blessings online learning event. I am Ethleen Ironcloud Two Dogs. Sheena Ikiktumi takes the robe woman. I'm Oglala Lakota. I'm also part Crow. I'm with the Tribal Law and Policy Institute, the Tribal Youth Resource Center as a technical assistance manager. And I'm really honored to introduce a person who is going to be who has agreed to do our opening, our director, Mushke Stephanie Autumn, was going to join us, but due to some unforeseen circumstances, she is unable to join us. So Mahasani, my other half, Mr. Richard Two Dogs Huya Money, takes the robe woman. Sorry, walks with the roaring. I really translated my own name. I'm sorry, Mahasani. Huya Money walks with the roaring. He's from Porcupine, South Dakota, Oglala Lakota. He's a Waka'ieska interpreter of the sacred, and he is going to be doing our opening. So I'll turn it over to him now.
Can you hear me okay, everybody?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you. I'm going to pray in my Lakota language, and everybody pray in your mind with me at this time. Oya tunkashila, apewi ki wakan kinaji chuha. Ohechi mitaki ahikeju na taku akia pikti yunka hena wichak shila ashtek da hechi hoichich. Ohechi tukata ke yana hechi tchecha lena uichak ya pikti yunka. Was agwichaink de heche wachinye kia washi lena echuna. Taku kiglekok da heche hoiwalo. Ohechi lena otoyohi la tiwae chekte ton hib heche tka atuina. Ohechi tiwae onki tchapik imkichi washte pono. Tona hel onyapi. Ohena wuchozani wamgalake. Wanichem kale okta uyana. Dejit chonjim kali ukta heche hoi chiche lokton kashla. Ohechi chtilean petu ki chechiche nomichi chona. Onshi mukila wichasha onshi kahemacha na makaki le akan yithawoku za wihamani na makaki jakha etanto wawo ki ichukta hechi hena hechi tulo o hechi tulo mitakasin.
Wopila Panka Mahasani for that beautiful opening. Go to the next slide. So the Tribal Youth Resource Center has been in operation for some years now under the administration of the Tribal Law and Policy Institute. And the vision for the Tribal Youth Resource Center is we envision a future where all Indigenous youth thrive through their own traditional lifeways. And our purpose is to enhance the opportunities for Indigenous youth and their communities to realize their full potential and protecting and nurturing their most sacred asset, which is the youth. So these are our presenters. I did introduce myself in the beginning there, and I'm real happy to be able to turn it over to my Toshkas to introduce themselves.
How Mataki Api. Dande na Kugi and Mielo. My name is the sound the earth makes when it thunders. I come from the Ponca and Hopi Nation, while I follow the Lakota, Dakota, Nakota way of life. My Ina, Stephanie Adama, Te, Arthur Owen. Um, I work for a Tribal Youth Research Center as a consultant. The last 25 years, I've been going into juvenile correctional facilities working with our Indigenous youth. So I'll pass this on to my GA to introduce himself next.
Amitakepi, Chantewashte Nape Tuzapi, Reuben Kahi, Wiaka Ematia, Iawaslaha, Hematraha na Wana, Santa Rosa, California, El Wati. Greetings, my relatives. I greet you with a heartfelt handshake. My name is Reuben Crowfeather Sr. I'm a member of the Standing Rock Sioux Tribe, and I currently live in Santa Rosa, California. My educational background is in addiction studies, and also I work in cultural. I am a teacher of drum dance, and we use cultural as means of prevention for substance abuse, violence abuse, gang prevention, and etc. I'm very happy to be here today. Thank you.
Thank you, Coach Dobbs, and we're very honored that both of you, with your background and experience, were able to join us today. So what are we going to be talking about today? This is a basic summary. We know, all of us know in this virtual room, in this virtual circle, how important our youth are to us. We know that they have a wealth of energy, a wealth of skills. They possess great potential for leadership. They are our hope for the future and they're our blessing. But unfortunately, we have young relatives that are faced with challenges that impact their lives and lead to involvement with and detainment in the youth justice system. So we're going to have a conversation about that. What are some cultural alternatives to detention from an Indigenous perspective? So we hope that we can achieve these learning objectives, increase knowledge about the rate of Indigenous Native youth that are detained in juvenile correctional facilities. We want to explore with you Indigenous cultural protective factors as opportunities for prevention, intervention, and healing. And we also would like to share ideas, you included, the audience, on advancing and promoting alternatives to detention so that those youth that go into detention and correctional facilities, they're considered out of sight, out of mind. We don't really know how they're doing educationally, mental health wise, spiritually. So we really want to highlight alternatives to being detained. So I'll turn it over to Toshka Reuben now.
You're on mute, Chie.
Sorry about that. What is youth detention? Youth detention are for youth ages from 12 to 17. And we've seen youth as young as 9, 10 years old that have spent time in juvenile facilities. Recently, I've been working at the Valley of the Moon, a place for displaced children. And when the youth are brought to this home, they are brought into an institution. They are stripped of their parents. They're stripped of their family. They're stripped of their community connections. How does the next slide go? The next slide. The number of juvenile detentions in the United States, of the 572 tribes, we have only 3 BIA operated youth facilities. We have a total of 22 BIA tribal and self-governance JDCs here in the United States. Next slide. Adverse effects of youth detention. When I think about the adverse effects of youth detention, I go back and I think of my father. And my father is a product of the boarding school era. He was taken from the family at kindergarten age and brought to St. Joe's in Chamberlain, South Dakota. My father was stripped of his parents' love. He was brought into a place where he was stripped of his language, his cultural identity, and he was punished. When not following the boarding school's rules and laws, he was then taken to Plankinton, which is how do I put that? I don't know how to put that on. Sorry about that. How do I put that on?
What are you trying to do?
Oh, somebody tried to call. Sorry about that. So we think about the adverse effects that this caused my father, depression, substance abuse issues, disproportionate punishment from non-natives for the things that for his lack of better understanding. I'm sorry, that messed me up really bad. Forgive me.
That's okay,
Life
Toshka.
lifetime consequences, you know, and so that historical trauma then came over to myself. And as a young boy, dealing with my father's alcoholism, it caused me to carry anger. It caused me to carry depression. It caused me to um, um, feel less than. And so when we think about juvenile detention, we I'm sorry, I already lost my train of thought there.
I wanted to make a comment, Toshka. I
Yeah,
think, there's the research shows, that there are adverse effects of youth detention, of being confined and detained and imprisoned, incarcerated, whatever word we want to use. But a lot of the research, it doesn't really talk about the spiritual health, the impact on the spiritual health. And I don't mean religion, I mean our own spirit. And I think that's what you were referring to when you said your father, there was a negative impact, and then you had also felt that negative impact also. So, for Native youth, then we really have to look at that intergenerational, the impact on the spirit. So thank you for sharing that about your father and about your own experience. And really, there is lifetime consequences. Once that experience of being detained or incarcerated does have a lifetime, impact. So really appreciate you sharing.
thank you, Tui. So one of the things that I've been able to do here in Santa Rosa, I began a program called First Warrior. And First Warrior is a name that I was given, Akichita Tokahe, I was given by my elders. And what I've done with my program is to use the Wokpe, the spiritual laws, the star laws, to share these teachings with the youth there at the Valley of the Moon. Also, I'm working in middle school and high school, and we teach them what it means to have respect. We teach them what it means to have wo'ihitika, bravery, wo'chat'ognaka, generosity, wo'wa'unshila, compassion, again, wo'ochola, that respect. And it's really changed the lives of a lot of my students. One of the best compliments that I received was, Uncle, ever since I started coming to your group, my life has changed. I want to do better. I want to do better for my mom. And for me, that was very rewarding. And so to bring these into our schools, to bring them into the juvenile detention centers, to bring them into the homes for displaced children is our mission. And here at the Tribal Youth Center, we're doing our best to educate facilitators and parents. And yeah, okay. Sorry.
Thank you so much for that. So basically, what I heard was turning those adverse effects, transforming them into something positive, like something that can help the community. So, Wopila, thank you, Toshka. I'm going to turn it over to Toshka Craig to give an overview of this next video clip that we're going to be seeing.
So this next, hello, my relatives, and I just want to first of all thank you for being here today and giving us your time because I know everyone has a busy schedule, and just thank you. So for this next video, I want everyone to think about this young lady as your Jeanette, as your daughter, your niece, your sister, your grandchild, and think about how you would want your relative to be treated in this situation. So just really keep that in mind while you watch this video. Go ahead, hit play. Thank you.
Jeanette Hawk is Lakota. She's 17. She sits alone on a bed in a cinder block cell in a facility where she's incarcerated far from home. She feels lonely and depressed, and she's struggling with PTSD. She's not receiving culturally appropriate services to address her ongoing mental health issues or the expected challenges of rejoining the community once she is released. Jeanette's story begins in the 1860s, when the United States first began to assert federal control over Native youth by forcibly removing them from their communities and placing them in boarding schools. Jeanette's great-grandparents and grandparents, on both sides of her family, had been rounded up, taken away from their families, and sent to boarding schools in other states far from their homes as part of the U.S. policy to eliminate Native American cultures and peoples if they didn't assimilate. Young people in the boarding schools were not allowed to speak their languages or to engage in any cultural or spiritual practices. They were severely punished if they did. Thousands of Native American children and youth endured physical, emotional, and sexual abuse. Many never returned home, and their whereabouts are still unknown today. The boarding schools disrupted transfers of cultural knowledge from one generation to another. These disruptions have been passed down and have directly created the circumstances Native youth struggle with today. The legacy of exploiting, excluding, and denying Native youth basic needs, education, healthcare, and opportunities have robbed them of their chance to live safe and fulfilling lives. Jeanette's mother tried to care for her as best as she could, but she struggled with her own unresolved trauma. Jeanette's father was not around. Although very intelligent, Jeanette struggled in school, and she was often bullied by other students and targeted by some teachers because she was Native American, and others who thought she was just being lazy. Over the course of her teenage years, Jeanette developed a criminal history of truancy, vandalism, underage drinking, theft, and fighting, all symptoms of unresolved historical trauma. This isn't the first time that she's been incarcerated. The rest of Jeanette's story and the possible outcomes for her depend on a number of factors. For example, she can be prosecuted by 3 separate justice systems: tribal, state, and federal. Indian country's maze of jurisdiction was created by years of assimilative federal Indian policy and Supreme Court decisions. And as a result, there's not healing for Jeanette or others like her. There's only punishment. To change this, we must actively engage in meaningful, inclusive justice reform. This reform begins with engaging in relationship building with Native nations. It's been demonstrated time and again that connecting with culture creates protective factors for Native youth. Some youth may not fully know their connections to a Native nation, or they may be embarrassed or afraid to disclose that relationship. The only way to accurately identify Native youth and to connect them with their nations, their cultures, and their communities is to ask in every single case and notify every nation in which the youth may be a citizen or eligible for citizenship. Once the Native youth's nation or nations has been identified, it should be invited to collaborate in assessing the youth, identifying appropriate services, and then connecting them. In relationship building with the Native nation, agencies increase the pool of resources available to serve the youth and provide rehabilitative support rather than punishment. Supporting Native youth uplifts our shared futures and common values. Whether you're a justice worker, a youth leader, a teacher, a neighbor, or a youth volunteer, there are countless ways you can support positive outcomes for Native youth. Learn more about diverse Native nations and their citizens. Support youth justice reform. Become an ally. Volunteer at school or in your community. Offer financial or in-kind support to Native-led, community-based organizations and initiatives, and donate to Native advocacy organizations like the Association on American Indian Affairs. To learn more about U.S. relations with Native nations and the issues challenging Indian country, contact the Association on American Indian Affairs. The association can provide training and assistance to support change.
So the reason I want to show that video because I want everyone to think about Jeanette as your own relative. And if she was your own relative, you wouldn't want her to go to a place that puts her behind bars and away from her family. Because before Europeans came over, we had no prison systems. We didn't put even our own people in prisons. Definitely not our youth because our youth is sacred. So if we all start thinking about that way, that our youth are sacred and that each one of them are either our nephew, niece, son, daughter, sister, we would find better ways for them than correctional facilities. So go ahead, Chi. So the next one is to talk about the disparities between tribal and Caucasian youth. And even though we're the smallest population on this earth in the United States, our numbers are the highest in prisons, especially juvenile prisons and adult prisons. In 2021, tribal youth were 3.7 times as likely to be detained in the community and juvenile facility as the Caucasian peers. And that's just unheard of. That's crazy since we're the smallest population on this earth. Okay, Jay. You got anything to
Between
add?
two, between 2011 and 2021, overall juvenile placements fell 59% in the 11 states with at least 8,000 tribal youths between the ages of 10 and 17. Between 2011 and 2021, disparities grew by at least 50% in two and decreased by at least 50% in two. So what does that mean? It means that as national numbers are lowering, our tribal numbers are raising. And so, how do we prevent this from continuing?
Go next slide, Haley. Haley, Hannah, someone go to the next slide.
What slide are you on?
There. Yep. So what my brother was just saying was like for nationally, the placement rate is 74th per 100,000 for tribal youth placement is 181 per 100,000 compared to the Caucasian placement is 49 per 1,000. So that's huge. That's a big number. And so we really need our tribes to start reaching out or having communication with when our kids get locked up. We need to find out where they're at. We need communication between tribes and state. That way we could ask for our children back. We could bring them back and have them transfer to our facility or and have us make the decision for them. You go to the next page, Haley.
Before you do, Toshka, I just wanted to call attention to, could you go back, Haley, to that last slide? Look at that third bullet. Nationally, the youth placement rate was 74 per 100,000 in 2021. And Toshka mentioned this before, but it's just, to me, it's astounding. The tribal youth placement rate was 181 per 100,000 compared to white youth placement rate of 49 per 100,000. Just think about that, those numbers. And one of the cautions I have about numbers, thinking about numbers, is that it really hides I guess, the true impact. These are, like Toshka said earlier, somebody's son, somebody's daughter, somebody's takoja, their grandchildren, somebody's brother, sister. So whenever we think about, how many of our youth are getting placed, compared to the white youth placement rate, then it's just, what is that? 3-4 times as much, almost 4 times as much. The rate is 4 times as many going into placement, going into detention centers, residential treatment centers, group homes, prisons. So I just wanted to call attention to that. This is to me, it's a national crisis. And again, we don't see it. When I say we, society doesn't see it as a crisis because our numbers as Native American, American Indians is low compared to the overall population in the United States. But to us, like myself, I'm a Unchi, I'm a grandmother, and I think about, all the grandchildren that are going into these prisons, into these facilities. So it's a call to action. I really believe it is a call to action that we will work as hard as we can to eliminate those numbers there that are youth getting placed. So I kind of got off on a soapbox there, so sorry, Toshka.
No,
for
you're
cutting
good.
in.
And like on that subject, a lot of our youth are in there for minor offenses like running from group homes or
Mhm.
curfew or underage drinking. And when I dug into this, at least in Minnesota, a lot of judges, the reason they sentence our people to correctional facility, not and then the Caucasian people back home, they consider reservation and where they live in like the projects high risk. So they getting our children are getting punished because where they're from. And it's strange because the government put us there to begin with. And now they're punishing us again. So for some reason we just keep getting punished and punished for being on this reservation. And so that's all I had for that subject. So we can switch to the next page. In 2021, Minnesota, South Dakota, North Dakota, North Carolina, not North Dakota, tribal youth are at least 5 times likely to be in a placement as a white youth. Between 2011 and 2021, New Mexico, Oklahoma saw their tribal and white disparity decrease by 50%, but in North Carolina and South Dakota, the tribal youth increased by 50%. So something's not adding up there. I don't know if Cheween have anything to say on the subject, or Brother Reuben, but to me, a lot of our people like it says it decreased in Oklahoma. That's hard to believe, but a lot of time when you fill out a sheet, you gotta put what you are. If you put your part Caucasian or um, anything non-native, that's what you fall under, and not Native American.
Yeah, and I think it just speaks to what we were talking about earlier, is that it is a national crisis, that we do have to do more research and create more programming to eliminate these rates.
And if you guys all see this chart, you can see the disparity in this chart.
And it would be interesting to see, what are they doing in New Mexico, for example, to have their numbers decrease, by 66%. And I think we can learn from each other. The states can learn from each other.
Growing up in the Little Earth community and urban Native community, South Minneapolis, the same precinct where they murdered George Floyd, throughout our lives, we witness police brutality, over policing. We cried for help. The American Indian movement was born out of the police brutality that was going on in South Minneapolis. And we cried for help. We cried for help. We cried for help. And it took George Floyd getting murdered on camera for them for anybody to even listen to us and to believe us. Our own community allowed our youth to be racially profiled. And in 2016 at the Red Lake gang and drug, what was the title of it? Anyhow, I was asked to speak on racial profiling, and the police department then we're spreading propaganda that Reuben was saying not to trust law enforcement, but the overall purpose of my information was to bring awareness that we are allowing law enforcement to racially profile our children.
So what we really want to start doing is doing better for our youth, doing better for our children, our relatives. And even in our own courts, we're still meeting them in a courtroom. And we believe that's a square world. We need to bring them into the circle that we were taught our whole life from the beginning of time, what we believe in. Meet the youth outside the courtroom on Unchi Maka, Mother Earth. Go for a walk with them. Go meet them at a ceremony. Go in the sweat with them first, so you can see him as a relative and not as someone who did something bad. And sit down with them, get to know them, and instead of like finding a way to get them locked up, find a path forward for them in the community. You know, like I said before, our people didn't have prisons before came over. So we got to go back to that way of thinking. We got to find a way to treat our youth and take care of our youth as our relatives. You go next slide here, Haley.
Toshka, there's some comments in the chat and a couple questions. Eva's asking, how much time are our youth spending in detention centers compared to their white counterparts? I know our Indigenous adults are sentenced at longer sentences, so I would think the same about our youth. So while I don't have that information, do you have any information on that?
The only information I got is what from my experience working in the correctional facility. So in Red Wing, I speak of Red Wing, Minnesota. So what happened is they're on a step system. They got to get to level 5 or step 5 to be released. And when they get to step 4, they start finding a placement for them our way back home from them. But for our native youth, they get held back, like I said before, because they live on a reservation or they live in a project. So what they do, they find a place, a group home for them or a halfway house for them. And what ends up happening, they run from that because they want to be home. They want to be close to their relatives. So then they end right back up in Red Ring. So not only do our youth stay double the time in Minnesota, they're more likely to repeat offenders and come back to Red Wing because of that fact, because they're not allowed to go home to be with their mom, their dad, or their uncle, because the courts find it high risk for them to go home. So they put them in a group home or a halfway house, and they end up running. So they're set up for to fail, if you think about it.
And
so to answer that question, it's double right now in Minnesota.
Yes, thank you for that. Silver Little Eagle from Northern Cheyenne, hello Silver, is asking how big of a factor was COVID regarding tribal youth being held in placement? Do you have any comment on that? Either of you, Toshkas?
I don't have no numbers or anything for that. I think when COVID hit, it was trouble not just for our natives, it was for everyone. It never happened before. So a lot of people stayed a lot longer because of COVID.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead, Chia, you get into the next slide.
I'm not sure what slide you're on. I'm trying to figure it out.
Can you see on your screen?
No.
Well,
I'm
kinship.
still at the kinship. Odakuye kinship. Kinship matters. And so when I go into my programs, that's like one of the first things that I establish. We teach about mitakuye oyasin, that when we view our students as relatives, as a kojan or a koshka, a niece or a nephew. And so amongst our tribe, we've been blessed to still have our language intact. And so we want to encourage other tribes who their language might not be as strong to go back and to really learn the kinship terms, and to begin to build the relationships with the youth. My students, for example, they call me uncle, and a lot of them they're non-Lakotas, but they've come to understand that I am their uncle, that I do love them, I do want them to succeed, I do want the best for them. And so we need to be doing that in our communities. We get back, again, to go back to the Red Lake conference that I went to. I brought in the Red Lake boxing team, and we brought them into the conference room. They came in walking. They're athletes, so they dress like athletes. They're also have their colors: the red, the white, and the black. And for people, when they see these colors, which are sacred colors, they see gang colors. And so all of this room full of law enforcement that were in the room, I asked if when they see these young men, if they see gang members. And there was no response. It was crickets in the room. And so I told him, I said, I will take that as a yes. I said, well, these young men are not gang members. These young men are not criminals. These young men are your grandchildren. These young men are your sons and your nephews. And once we can open our eyes to that sacred understanding that they are relatives, then they can feel loved. When we discard them, they feel it. When we don't care, they feel it. So how do we bring them in? How do we show them we care? How do we show them we love? Just like at the beginning of our program here today, we began with a prayer. And so in my groups that we do, we always begin with a prayer. We utilize our medicines. We teach about the medicines, and with the kinship, we, like my student had said, he said, I want to do better. I want to do better for my mom. Mother's Day is every day. And so uh, again, for our adults who are facilitating these spaces for our youth, it's important for them to receive training and to not be afraid to ask for that training. And so, because many of our people our age have been disconnected from the culture. Myself, I was educated at the Heart of the Earth Survival School, which is a cultural, spiritual based program. And so I was able from a young age to learn all of these cultural ways, and that helped to prevent. I never had a juvenile record, while my peers were in and out of the group homes. They were in and out of county home schools. My participation in powwows, my singing, my dancing, they gave me a sense of belonging. They gave me a sense of identity. Even like our what they call Indian names, our spiritual names, they give us they give us identity, they give us direction. One of the names I was given, Nahi Yotaka, sitting shadow. It propelled me in my life to understand what the Nahi really is. And so for us adults who are entrusted with the youth, it's very, very important that we begin to learn and to seek understanding and knowledge of culture. A lot of times we feel like, oh, we might not be Indian enough. We feel like, oh, a lot of times we feel less than because we don't speak the language. And so that is something that we need to get over as adults, and to help our youth make that transition from a child to a youth to an adult. And so again, to learn the kinship and to really, really, really live it. You know, when we see our students, we treat them with that love, the same way we would treat our own children.
You go next slide, Haley. So we really want to use the buffalo because the buffalo really our whole being on Uchi Makal, the buffalo really helped our people from feeding us to keeping us warm. So when we get start working with our youth, we really wanted to really work with everything, not just use like the buffalo. We just don't want to use it for the meat. We want to use everything. So we want for the like the horns. What are the kids' strengths when they first come in there? Instead of looking for the weakness. And like I said, the eyes, see a path forward. Heart, trauma. What's causing this kid to act out like this? There has to be a reason. Not it's not just because they're bad. None of our people are born bad. You know, we don't believe in that in our way of life. Something is causing this. And then we go to the legs. Bring the culture. Wherever tribe you are, involve that kid in the culture. Give them a chance to connect with this way of life. If they don't have a chance to connect with this way of life, we really ain't giving them a chance. We're setting them up to fail too, just like the government is. So next slide, Haley. So this is pretty much what it just breaks down what I was just saying in this program we want to use going forward. And no program is perfect out there. And like what Tueen was saying, we got start working with each other more, tribe to tribe, and seeing what works. Because we know this correctional facility isn't working for our children, it isn't working for our people. So we gotta figure a way to help our people. You got anything, Che?
Um, yes, within my programs and my groups, creating a vision. We utilize all of our teachings are within our language. So I know today that we're talking to a great amount of different tribes here today. And for example, our Lakota word for the mind, kawachi. You know, we ask Tui, we ask like she, a fluent language speaker, how do you say the mind? And they'll say without batting either, say kawachi. And in English, they tell us all the time, whatever we put our mind to, we can do it. And our literal translation of tawachin is that what I want, wachin, what I want. And so one of the practices that I use is to we utilize the drum. We utilize the drum and we create a vision in their mind to help them to create a vision that is free of incarceration. Our native youth, the disparities and the likely chances that they will be incarcerated is overwhelming. So for many of them, they think that there's no other opportunity or no other road other than incarceration, especially once they get into a little bit of trouble, you know, whether if it's a truancy or um, um, trouble in school, maybe they get in a fight and they get put into probation. So how do we help them to see beyond probation? How do we help them to create a vision of graduating high school? How do we help them create a vision to become a college graduate? And so again, it goes back to the language, it goes back to the culture and creating a vision. And any tribe can do this. Any tribe can learn their language, and you know they say the best way to learn is to teach. So we learn these philosophies and we implement them.
And to give you guys an example of this, just 2 weeks ago, I was in a correctional facility and we did the first sweat in there that hasn't been done in 3 years because of COVID and everything. And all the guards and all the staff were nervous because there was 2 different gangs in there, and they didn't want them to cross paths. But we needed a doorman, and one of the leaders of the one gang, he stayed in. He was the doorman, and so they brought up extra staff because they thought there was gonna be a fight. And when the other group came up, they seen him, and you could tell they were talking on the way up. But when they got up there, they all just shook his hand. And when we went into the sweat, they all prayed for him. And so that just shows you how much our way of life means to them because there was no fights. Those guards, those two been in locked up for 2 years together. And they never seen each other. And that day they seen each other for the first time, and there was no fights because they respected this way of life, and they were grateful for what they got to do that day. So I just want to share that much. Next slide.
Thank you so much, Toshkaz. And I do want to mention that, the Plains people, they really ascribe to like the Star Nation and the Buffalo relatives, horse relatives. And I know that across the country and up our relatives up in Alaska, you also have relatives that you really count on, for guidance. I know that there's a canoe journey, they call it, and I've been up to Alaska to some of the villages where they do have these camps, and their focus is on, their relatives up there. So I just want to really acknowledge that, that anywhere you go, there's going to be tribes and indigenous communities and relatives that have teachings and guidance, from their ancestors that, that are really, really critical to making sure that we live in balance. So this slide is, talks about the cultural alternatives. So the ceremonies, for example, what are ceremonies? The Toshkaz mentioned some of them, like the inipi in the Lakota language, that is a term for a purification ceremony. There's also naming ceremonies, and I know that you in the audience, you have a lot of knowledge about this, about the ceremonies that are in from your people. There's also a concept that's called igluashte in the Lakota language. It's a term that is refers to making amends. So if we make a mistake, then we have a responsibility, according to the Lakota worldview, to igluashte, to make it back in balance. So, for example, if somebody has a conflict, then the families would get together, and the person that offended the other person, they would give gifts to the family, and they would make sure that there was a process for healing and for conflict transformation. And I won't say resolution, because there may not be a resolution. It may be something that is very complex, but there is, like a transformation, that they agree that they aren't going to have any more violence, or, there's a process to it. So that speaks to the traditional peacemaking. And I know that there has been peacemaking courts across the nation, community restorative circles, elder and community mentoring. I know one of our the Winnebago tribe has the Youth Crisis Intervention Center, and they actually have elders on staff. And there was a question in the chat box about, wanting suggestions for engaging elders or mentors. And during the question and answer, the discussion time, then we want to invite people to discuss their own programs and their own, suggestions for resources. Like I said, the Healing of the Canoe Project, Wild Variety White Bison Project. But as with anything, there's challenges, right? So how do we implement cultural alternatives to detention, but also acknowledge and work toward removing or going around or going over these challenges, which include jurisdictional issues. There's also lack of access to ceremonies. How can we create that connection? I did talk to some people on the eastern side of the state, my state, which is in South Dakota, and they work for the 988 helpline, the suicide prevention helpline. And one of the things that they shared was that the majority of callers are experiencing grief and a major loss in their lives. And so we talked about, how do we address that, and for our Native Indigenous people, for Lakota people, we have a ceremony that is called Ishtamani Wichaki Chipa Kintapi, which is the wiping of tears ceremony. So we talked with them about offering that on that side of the state because there's generally a lack of access to, the ceremonies. So we're in the process of, discussing that and planning that. There's historical trauma and disconnection from the culture. There's people that will say, well, I wasn't raised that way. And, I don't know anything about that. And Toshka Reuben talked about that a little bit about having, some being belittled or shamed for not knowing the culture or the language. So that's a factor there that we have to address in a sensitive, compassionate way. And there's systemic issues. There's poverty, there's discrimination, there's racism that we really have to bring to the forefront and talk honestly about it. Community involvement, a lot of people do not want to get involved, and implement or plan or develop, cultural alternatives to detention. A lack of resources, definitely that is a factor in many of our communities that they don't have the resources to really implement, certain activities. Cultural sensitivity to diversity among cultures. So we have not only our culture, like say, for example, I'm Lakota, but we have diversity within the Lakota culture. So we really have to look at the sensitivity, make sure that we are sensitive to the diversity among our people. Next slide. So what are some examples of alternatives to detention? There's mentoring programs, there's family-focused therapy, there's advocacy programs. So like say, if you have a JDC in your area, a juvenile detention center, then who's actually advocating for those youth? Who is looking into, are they receiving educational services? Are they receiving mental health services? And how can we put those into place? Cognitive behavioral therapy, restorative practices and interventions, wraparound programs, locally designed alternatives to detention programs. And I want to highlight these programs here. I mentioned them before, Winnebago Tribe, the Youth Crisis Intervention Center. Daryl LaPointe Jr. is the director, and I see our relative, Charles Hensley, the elder, is also in the audience here. Welcome, and thank you for joining. And they will have some comments, about how they're doing things there. And I really appreciate their model because it's not about sending you to detention and then providing services. It's avoiding detention, preventing detention, and having them go to the Youth Crisis Intervention Center. So we'll hear from them also. The Oglala Sioux Tribe has a youth diversion program, and Tamara Marshall is the director, the coordinator of that, and Annie Brokenleg from the South Dakota Diversion Program is also very key in making sure that, these diversion programs are developed and implemented. So they may have some comments also. And our own Tribal Youth Resource Center, Youth Healing to Wellness Courts and Programs, the grantees, many of you have programs where you are trying to create these cultural alternatives to detention. So we appreciate hearing from you also. Okay. So our Tribal Youth Resource Center we try to pay attention to the alternatives to detention work. So in partnership with the National Native Children's Trauma Center, we provided a Think Trauma training, and these were provided to tribal juvenile detention centers in October of 2022 and October of 2023. We have training for youth in tribal juvenile detention centers. And because of restrictions, and many times it has to be, virtual, and which is not ideal, but, it is something that, can be done. Outreach to, I want to mention something too. I remember during COVID, then I was talking to Toshka Craig about, what is it that we can do? And I remember him mentioning how he would take a hand drum, and he would stand outside the JDC, the Juvenile Correctional Facility, and sing and pray. So when you think about, what we can do, and not waiting for a grant, there's a lot of things that we can do, and that's a really good example of that. And I want to thank you, Toshka, for your compassion and outreach during a time when nobody could go into those JDCs. One of the things that we've also done too, the Tribal Youth Resource Center, we facilitate a connection between the South Dakota State and Tribal Juvenile Detention Alternatives Initiative, JDAI, and the Winnebago Tribes Youth Crisis Intervention Center. I do really want to encourage, people to look into that. Do you have a Juvenile Detention Alternatives Initiative work group in your state? And do they collaborate with the tribes? We also collaborated on a tribal peer-to-peer summit on system-involved Native youth. And we're we're doing a proposal to research the number of tribal youth in detention. And some of those questions that came up about ICWA and COVID and length of stay, all of those will be in that research proposal. So thank you for your questions. So I'll turn it over to the Toshkas.
Thank you, Tumi. So now we're at the point where we're gonna let you guys ask whatever question you guys need to ask. And I know my sister Corey definitely has a question. So if you could take Corey off mute so she can ask her question. Is that possible? Haley, are you taking people off mute?
Yeah, they're allowed to talk right now.
Okay. Corey, are you there, sister?
Yeah, I am. My question was, when youth is released from incarceration, whether it's jail or prison system, is ICWA applied at all in transitional services, whether it's foster care, or any type of transitional homes, if they're not allowed to go back home? Or do we know if ICWA applies at all?
I don't know. The cases I dealt with, if the tribe wasn't involved, pretty much ICWA was not involved or did not come into factor. I don't know about you two, Ethleen, or did you have any?
It is supposed to apply, Corey, but that doesn't mean it is being applied. You know what I mean? Because there are a lot of cases in the Indian child welfare where the representation for children and advocacy is not there, and a lot of times due to lack of resources and also due to other factors. But I invite anybody that's involved in the child welfare system to respond if you have any information on this.
Yeah, as far as I know, all the cases I dealt with, the tribes, like Red Wing Correctional Facility, is 6 hours from the reservation, sometimes farther than the reservation. So tribes are pretty much they forget about these kids that are locked up. So then the state is pretty much doing whatever they want to do with these children. So in my cases, ICWA was not a factor.
I work for the Minnesota Board of Public Defense, and we have a few folks that just deal specifically with youth that are going through the youth judicial system. There's sometimes that I'll get people that are certified as adults. Is there anything that we can be doing in the public defender's office to try and make sure that, I mean, even though it's the tribes that are supposed to, even though the tribes aren't bringing attention to it, or the kids are getting forgotten by the tribes, really not the tribe's responsibility to enforce that. They should be figuring that out, just at the court level. So is there anything that we can do as public defenders to say, hey, this child, or this young person has checked this box. What's the next transition? Do we get in contact with the tribes, or how can we be more helpful to make sure that these youth and young people are, that their welfare act is being thought about, and that their rights are being preserved, as well as the parents?
Definitely, I think there needs to be outreach to the tribes and a dialogue and collaboration about having that connection and advocacy for that youth. There should be a notice. And who's the connection? So whenever I was working with some foster parents and the child welfare system, then they said, well, where do we go? Who do we go to whenever our child needs, help with, like, say, a naming ceremony, or they want information on maybe a coming of age ceremony? Then, my response to them was, I'm one of your resources. You have my contact information. You have my email address. If I can't do, something, that I can make connections so that your child can be responded to, and you and your family can have the information that you need. So I think that extra outreach is really, really important. So thank you for asking that.
And I think
Pila.
part of the problem is the youth don't check that box, right? Like Sister Corey was saying, that box is checked. Some of them, when you first get locked up, they don't care to fill out the boxes. So then the system sometimes just marks them as Hispanic. And then when I get to them, they're like, hey, this kid wants to come to your program, but he didn't check Native American, but he speak fluent Ojibwe. I'm like, yeah, he's Native. They're like, yeah, but he didn't check the box. So that's where some of our kids get lost too, because they don't check the box.
Thank you for answering that. I think one of the things that I could take away and maybe bring back to the public defender's office is, I have seen youth be marked as Pacific Islander when I know that they're not.
Too. Yep.
So I think one of the things that I can take away is make sure that what we're doing is we're saying, hey, we're advocating for you. So if there's things that you could qualify for and rights that we can preserve. So if you fall within this category, let me know. And then is there family that I can reach out to, or what tribe are you affiliated with, so I can notify? Does that seem right?
Yep. Thank you,
Yeah.
sister.
Thank you for that. There is a question from, I'm sorry, Dejani, if I mispronounce your name, but he's asking for, or she, I'm sorry, any suggestions or thoughts on engaging mentors and elders to work with youth as part of our program. And I would like to ask our elder relative from Winnebago tribe, Charles Hensley, if you have any comments for them, any suggestions for them on how to engage mentors and our elders. And you can put it in the chat, or you can speak to that.
Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Can anybody see me?
Yeah.
No.
It's, first of all, I'd like to say, for anyone, his education, I'd like to say, greetings to all of you. Thank you for this webinar. And I'm really liking what I'm hearing. And then at the same time, I'm very concerned about all our people as Native Americans. You know, we all come from one place, and then we all need to help each other some way, somehow, however it's going to be. But one of the most important things is like our Healing to Wellness Court here in Winnebago. And by the way, Ethleen, Sister Ethleen, I'd just like to say we come from the Ho-Chunk Nation. We're no longer, well, here in Winnebago, that's just the name of the town, Winnebago, but we're known as Ho-Chunks. Long story. But in our the court system here, the Healing to Wellness Court primarily works with the youth. And the reason why they work with the youth is because they themselves here in Winnebago, they thought that would be the target that they wanted to focus on, because they believe that if you get them at an early stage, then you don't have to worry about other things that are going to happen down the road, so to speak, like after high school, those kind of things like that. And yeah, I mean, there's nothing that's 100% in helping people, but then you can help them too. From my experience, you know, the most important thing that when I came aboard here, when we started working with we have a wraparound service here. Then the wraparound service that we have is we have our we're me and one of my colleagues, her name is Sarah Snake. She's also an elder here, elder advocate, and I'm an elder advocate here in Winnebago. Here we work with the school system. Then the kids that get either caught with whatever it is, like last year was vaping, THC vaping, and so before they go on probation, or before they go see probation officers give them a chance to not go on paper, and then they send them to the Healing to Wellness Court. And then so we have our director here. His name is Curtis Alexander. So we set up a meeting with him, and then we talk about this client, and then we go into talking about this client, and then we look at the services that this client may need. So we have counseling, we have prevention, and then we have I also do a curriculum, Generation Red Road curriculum, and that curriculum, the tribe here implemented like our cultural ways, and it's really important for these young people. A lot of them, they're not aware of culture, or they don't have no aware of, like you could say, identity. They don't know their name, Indian name, I should say, or Native American name. Then some of them, they don't know their like us. We got clans. Then in some of the clans that we have, then there's duties that we have. But as all Native Americans, you know, there's all duties that we have as far as going from taking care of a home. Having number one is I tell them they have to have respect, and respect is number one. Number one is some of them they come from broken homes. Maybe they had just living with their mother, or living with their dad, or live with the grandparents. But a lot of them come from like dysfunctional homes, alcohol related situations, or either that the parents are gone to alcohol related situations. And but nevertheless, you know, I tell them, you know,
that where they come from is a very beautiful place. And then in there, then our people, my grandpa, I always talk about my grandpa. He was one that told us, he told us kids, he said, your great grandfathers, they went through all the pain and agony that anyone could ever go through when we had this genocide. Then in that genocide, then here we have to go through this, just like my son there, Reuben, he was talking about historical trauma. That historical trauma trickled down to our grandparents, then it trickled down to our parents, and then it trickled down to us here, where today I always call it the pirate world. Our people live in a world that they don't, only time they think spirituality is on a weekend. But I said our people used to pray every day from the time they get up till the time they go to sleep. They used to talk to the Creator all the time. Used to be that way, but here we are living in this world. We have to deal with education. We have to deal with getting up, getting on the bus, going to school, learning this European education, Western education, or it could be Eastern education, depends on where you're at. But those are just some of the like key components that the whole chunk here, or the curriculum that we have. It's implemented in there. So there's a lot about even going into talking about creation stories, different things, and now we're coming up with a new curriculum. It's called Dartna, and we're going to be that's going to be coming out here soon, and we're really implementing a lot of our culture than what the drum represents. And there's a lot of things that if you can find elders in your area that are knowledgeable about a lot of the culture ways. It's really important to get them put them in a place where they can help. But at the same time too, then like here with the tribe here, there's a lot of funding that's available out there. But at the same time too, there's a lot of things that happened here that made it possible that we could have. It wasn't as easy as it is now compared to before I came on. They struggled to get different services here, and now we're working like like my boss. His name is Daryl Daryl Lapointe, and so in there, he went through a lot just to get what we have today. And so I'm very grateful, and I feel very blessed to be in this position where I am today, and I feel very honored to the Creator, thanking Him for the things that He blessed me with. I'm very fortunate that I had grandfather, that I had my dad, and all my relatives, my uncles, my aunts. They were very knowledgeable about a lot of things. But yeah, that's just kind of some of the things that I wanted to talk about today. It's and then it's really important to just like my son Reuben there, he was talking about praying. That's what I do with these kids. Then when I smudge with them too, I tell them that this sage, where it grows, my grandpa and my uncles, they used to say where the Creator is, all these herbs that we utilize, they all grow right there. So as soon as you light it, or as soon as you use it, right away He's going to be there. So they say that when you utilize them, then you think good about yourself. Think good about where you come from and where you're going to be going from here. Don't just kind of use it and just be any old way with it. Because if you use it, it's going to help you. That's some of the things. Sorry, I'm kind of getting carried away here.
That's okay.
Oh.
We appreciate
Thank you.
your input. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
I'm sorry we couldn't get to all of the other questions and comments in the chat. If we could go to the next slide, I know that we're at time here, but real quickly, couple suggestions. See if any of the 22 tribal JDCs are in your program, your grantees geographic service area. and encourage programs grantees to engage with or partner with JDCs to connect with those out of sight, out of mind youth relatives who are detained in JDC. Next slide, please. And as you all know, September is Suicide Prevention Month. We know that our Native youth are beautiful, they're strong, resilient, and some are hurting and in distress. Let's reach out to those who are. And I'd like to turn it over to Mahasani for the closing, and really appreciate all of you being here with us. And this is a topic that we could probably talk several hours on, but with this brief time, really appreciate all of you. Appreciate the Toshkas and appreciate our tech relatives. Haley, thank you very much. So I'll turn it over to Muya Money.
Okay, thank you. Good work you're all doing. Good webinar. Thank you for the information. I'll pray in my language now, Lakota language. Wayat kashla waka yung kigna kapik yung kang usun lakana. Tiwaya check chat on he betchet gato in tiwaya on kitroki. It's on kichosh the pono dona hill on your peak. And now it's a wamglak which I could see. No taki wugla kapile on petuki, then not rokata ki oyate ki ha yapina. Oechi lagi ana eta wonspelena to kilguna kiwastuk the hedge, uguna yonk the hedge chechichi. O hedge tiwaya check the tongue he betchet gato in hoche tiwaya kitroki amalaki. Wanneer ik hem kale op de monium na perit van zo'n kaljuk, dat het je heel wel. Om met takas.
Oh, thank you, Lexi.
Opila Lexi.
Aho.
References?
Tumi, could I add something really fast?
Yes.
To answer the question, I want to send my love and respect to my Jaji, Charles, and also the question was how do they reach out to mentors and elders, and tobacco in our cultural teachings, we always offer tobacco to culture bearers, to elders, to mentors. And so when you do that with your programs and you offer the tobacco for a woman or a man, or a traditional woman or a man, if they accept that tobacco, then they're gonna do their best to help you. If you just ask them, hey, can you come help us? And they say, then it's not a binding agreement. But when you offer that tobacco, they accept that tobacco, then they're bound by that tobacco to come into to help you. So just to answer that question on how to reach out to mentors and elders, I'll bet you to.
Thank you. So please complete the evaluation survey. And yes, we can send the slides out, and we also have other resources that we can send. So that should have popped up on your screen, the evaluation. And the next slide, please. And this is our contact information if you would like to contact us. And we do have a list of the participants, so we'll send out slides. And if you have any questions or comments, feel free to email us. Thank you very much, everybody.